Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we take a look inside Juice Johnson's wide receivers room, and we also roll out a 3-day multi-level experience, the CNC Electric Factory preseason notables. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Bird Dogs. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter the promo code LockedOnCollege for a free hat with any purchase. And it's a slickin'. You don't want to take your Bird Dogs off when you get them. We promise you. So head on over to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. And slicking is an industry term. The first one used probably today, first of many. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. And Chris, it's great to be back with you once again today. And man, we are getting closer and closer to football season. And that means our bucket is getting fuller and fuller and fuller. So a busy show here today. Some things to get to on a local front as we will discuss Texas Tech pass catchers and hear from wide receivers coach Juice Johnson, one of the most interesting staff additions of the offseason for some different reasons, but a guy that also is presiding over one of the more interesting positional groups this offseason, trying to get this group of guys to take the next step. We'll get to some of them, Bradley Price and more. Also want to get to a wild idea involving ball games outside of conference that feature conference opponents. And could it be in Texas Tech's future possibly? And then Chris and I have got some preseason notables we're kicking at you. We're going to do this for the remainder of the week, talking freshmen, talking sleepers, talking breakout stars. So we'll get to that before we are done. But Chris, first, let's begin with the aforementioned Juice Johnson and his room of wide receivers.
I think, there's a lot of guys that are anxious to make plays out there. And I think that we have some depth. And so we're never, with what Coach Kidley does, we're never going to, kind of let a team, take a guy away from us. We got enough built in the system to where, we can do some things. And so I expect JB to be able to go out, and he's prepared himself to be able to go out and have a year he's prepared himself to have, as well as the rest of the guys. And so if, teams want to do that and try to take him away, we have full confidence in our other guys that they're going to make plays as well. So JB knows, there's no pressure on him to have to carry everything. We got full confidence in guys that can make plays.
Chris, once the home of the Afros, America's finest receivers on Saturday. Been a little while since you've had a group that resembled some of those. You've had some high points, guys like Eric Ezekanma and others come along. But I'm curious what kind of step they can take this offseason and how you're viewing this room that I think was close, but kind of no cigar as a room last year. Just not maybe consistent enough. I know they were hampered by some injury, and we got some of that to talk about heading into this year already. But a really interesting offseason for these guys, and what a luxury it'd be to really see them take a big step in the right direction this year.
Yeah, you think about Easy, you think about Kiki Kuti. There's been some guys that have been NFL-type guys that have snuck through here in years where you weren't as good as you wanted to be. But it's a weird group in that it's deep. It is talented. I just don't know if there's an alpha in there, if there is a Kiki or an Easy or one of these types of guys, and maybe Gerard is, maybe Loic is, maybe Dre McCray is, maybe Myles is. I don't know. I think Coy Aiken, was gonna really be a factor here, and you hear Coach Johnson talking about JB. I would offer up that maybe there's two JBs now, so you're going to have to go, which one? Because Jordan Brown has been really, really good in camp. And when I say really good, I mean, I can't – he's been one of the stories of camp, period. And I think his emergence, his speed. But Gerard is the one that is he's the guy that checks all the measurable boxes. He's the one that is first team All Big 12. But his numbers, if we're being honest here, his numbers were semi-modest, 51 catches, just under, 800 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. Again, I think a good year, but it's not a year to where you go. It's not like a Xavier Worthy type of year or what Quentin Johnston put up,
Yes.
game breaker type stuff to where, because I think what Juice is talking about there is interesting. In some ways, you like it because there is depth everywhere, and you like the fact that they can't key on one guy. However, I just remember how life was like around here when you did have a guy and they did try to key on him and he was so good that it didn't matter. And then it opened up things for everybody else. So I kind of wish that you did have somebody that was good enough where everybody was like, hey, this corner, this safety over here, their responsibility is Michael Crabtree, and everybody else, y'all worry about everybody else, so – because that's how some of those coverages, they just roll a safety over the top and they still couldn't stop a lot of it. So there's some good and bad there, I think,
Sure.
to point out.
Well, and I think you think about the individual, the feature guy like a Crabtree, and then what that does for others. And then you think about some of those other years where I guess we were just really spoiled. If you're talking, Filani, Johnson, Hicks at the same time. And that cast of characters kind of evolved over time, but there were a few years where there was like a duo or a trio, Darren Moore era, Eric Ward era. And we hadn't had that in quite some time. I mean, with all due respect to the guys that have been out there, bringing them in and taking them to the house, I haven't felt the Afros spirit in quite some time. It used to just kind of be like the standard, Chris. And I'd say I even almost got a little jaded as a fan because it was like, man, if we can't recruit any other player, we will have a good wide receiver. I know that. I don't know if it'll win us a game, but there's going to be some good wide receivers out there. And I don't want to say that's like gone away, but you're trying to get back to meeting that standard. There's no question about that as a group. And again, some of that impacted by injury and things out of your control. Others impacting that as far as a need of really just being more consistent and kind of taking that next step. So you could have it either way. And by the way, in the era of a very modest to sometimes bad offensive line, which has been for the most part the last decade's experience, that's having an effect on everybody, right? So I don't want to act like, boy, you just had some bum wide receivers out there. That hadn't been the case. There have been plenty of years where the offense has not clicked on all cylinders or, again, consistently been clicking on all cylinders. I'm glad you already mentioned the name Myles Price, however, because I think it is a tell in some ways that he's not one of the first names we mentioned as far as who is the leader, who's the guy that others look to, because this is a household name by now for a Texas Tech football fan, I think. He's a gray-haired Red Raider as far as young gray-haired Red Raiders can go, I guess. And he's a guy that's very, very vocal, Chris. So it's almost like obvious, hey, you should be in those shoes. Of course, sometimes when you're not on the field, hampered by injury, it's hard to fill that kind of role if you're not in the fire. Now, he was impactful whenever he was on the field, but I know it had to be a very frustrating season for him last year and hoping for some more consistency this season. But I want to go back and take a listen to Juice Johnson talking about Myles Price, because there are also some things he's asking him to do as far as the little things to help him take that next step as a player.
I wanted him to improve on just details, just general details in the blocking game. Where are my hands? Where are my eyes? Falling in love with the process of being a great practice player, right? And so we talk about practice reps becoming game reality, all right? And so him just falling in love with the process as far as route running. Where is my foot here in this route? Where are my hands and eyes on this blocking scheme? Where do I need to be versus this coverage? And so just overall, just football IQ and then attention to detail with the things that we're doing. And he's done a great job with that.
Chris, I'm a Myles Price fan, but to quote the king, it's now or never, right? The time has arrived if you're going to take that next step, at least in a Tech uniform.
To quote the king, was it peanut butter? Was he a peanut butter banana sandwich guy? Is that right?
I think that's right. Maybe a couple of barbiturates thrown in the middle, depending on time of day.
Something like that.
Little 3 a.m. karate, kung fu with the boys.
Yeah, that's right. Myles is it feels like he's been around here a while, and it's because he has. I think that last year was he played in 11 games, I think, but much of it was he was hampered. He couldn't be him because of his that ankle issue, and So some of the games he was playing, he was just trying to, gut it out. And if you take away his, the joystick part of what he does, he's not really the same guy. And I think what Juice is trying to, by the way, I think that the addition of Coach Johnson here has been awesome. I think he fit in perfect with this staff. Really the only staff addition on either side of the ball. And and you'd think he'd been here since Joey stepped on campus. And I think these kids are, and it's funny because I think what people will tell you about Juice is exactly what he's talking about Myles. What people have said about Coach Johnson and how he's coached the receivers is that he's come in here and he's made them a lot more detail-oriented, and he's made them a lot more focused on things like blocking and holding them accountable. They are better at those aspects of their game. And when you sit here and listen to him talk about Myles, it's everything except for catching the football and making plays. It's all the things, understanding where your hand placement is, blocking, getting in and out of your breaks. I mean, all the little minutia that comes with playing that position. And I think he's trying to sharpen those skills a bit because it will ultimately make him better. So I think it's funny because he talks about Myles in that way, but I think he's really been very focused on that way in the group. And every one of those receivers has got something different about them that they're needing to be better with. And I think Juice is really honed in on some of that. But with Myles, man, I think he's just trying to make him more of a polished receiver.
Well, and you know what I'm thinking about, again, to bring it back around full circle when you talk about great blocking, America's finest receivers on Saturday. I mean, the Mike Leach era, they took great pride in doing that. Not to say some of those guys that came after Coach Leach didn't, but that was a real thing. They were a physical bunch of pass catchers, and again, took great pride in it. And it was of extreme benefit to their offense. So hopefully that's a box that gets checked heading into 2023. Okay, we're going to circle back to Red Raider football before we are out of here. We've got some preseason notables to get to, and we'll be doing it with you the rest of the week. Freshman, sleeper, and breakout star. We're going to start with the freshman today. That's coming up in just a bit. But first, want to get to this wild idea in the Big 12 Conference and possibly something that Texas Tech could see at their doorstep before too long. You got a non-conference game scheduled with a future conference member. You getting rid of it? Not so fast. We'll tell you what this is all about up ahead on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by Bird Dogs. They're making you look good, feel great with their stretch shorts fitting slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you that sculpted look like you'd never had before. If only Ralphie May were here to see this. R.I.P. Sweet Prince. Way more flexible than that stiff, restricting stuff you're used to, thanks to their cloud knit fabric. Always made with organic, range-free clouds. It's going to stretch to give you movement without sacrificing that slimmer fit. And don't forget about that anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric. Your significant other won't, because it's keeping you dry, smelling good all day long, any occasion. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege right now, and you're getting a free hat with every order. That's at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, or enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for that free hat. And right now, get into something you don't want to ever take off. Guaranteed with Bird Dogs. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you got this podcast so you never miss an episode. We'll be back to Red Raider football coming up in just a moment. See everybody. Preseason notables coming up in just a bit. As I mentioned, we'll do it the rest of the week. So we'd love for you to chime in on the YouTube comments. We're looking for a freshman you expect to make an impact. We're looking for a sleeper maybe being overlooked, but we've seen before in red and black, and we're looking for a breakout star. We're going to get to this today, tomorrow, and Friday, starting with that freshman coming up here momentarily. But first, wanted to get to this story here, Chris. Didn't want it to slip through the cracks because it's kind of interesting, and we may see some more of this play out. Wondering if it could at some point impact Texas Tech. But right now, the conversation is happening surrounding Kansas State and a non-conference series with now future conference partner Arizona. K-State, Arizona had a 2024-2025 agreement. And obviously, well, that is at the doorstep. And so are the Wildcats as far as entry into the Big 12 Conference. Kansas State Athletics Director Gene Taylor this week said, quote, because that Arizona one is so close, we're going to see if we can keep that as a potential non-conference game. We at least want to be part of the conversation because it is so soon. They at least want that option to be part of the conversation because it is so soon. Chris, we've seen this before. I think there were some ACC examples of this, possibly a Big Ten example of this I saw as well. So it's not a totally foreign thought. I don't know that I've ever seen it happen to my team or somebody else in the Big 12 Conference, but I really don't hate the idea, and I guess it's mostly rooted in entertainment value. This is a Power 5 matchup that you would keep in addition to more inside the conference. So I'm going to have to vote in favor of that, I guess, at the end of the day, every time, even though it is sort of a little awkward.
Yeah, this is going to be a little more common than I think people start to realize. I think that this is going to be something that happens a bit in basketball, maybe on a regular basis. Where you play teams in your league, but it doesn't count against the standings. I think that there's potential bowl game scenarios even in play down the road where you end up playing a conference team because these conferences are so massive now. I think it just changes the dynamic, and I think that in some ways, hey man, we want to get a game with a Pac-12 school in the non-conference. Well, guess what, guys? The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore, and so because when you had your setup with Oregon, I think, Oregon, I guess, next year, Oregon will be in the Big Ten. So your game up at Outset Stadium will be a Big 12, Big 10 matchup. I think the years after that, you've got a home and home with Oregon State set up. Don't know what league they're going to be in. So, but some of these non-conference schedules were set up years in advance. I think this is the case with Arizona and Kansas State. So what they'll do is they'll just ensure that that's not a regular season game in those 2 years. They'll keep them out of their rotation and then just allow them to play it. Now, you start adding a bunch of ingredients into the scheduling formula, and it can be a bit tricky. It can be a bit cumbersome for somebody sitting there with a spreadsheet going, okay, now these guys can't play each other because they're doing, okay, well, this whole thing won't work. We got to, submit it back into the computer and see what it spits out. So you don't want too much of these kinds of things, but I do think that on a regular basis, this is going to be, I think, more normal than people realize, and I'm okay with it. I mean, you telling me you wouldn't want to play, any of these schools in basketball and just be like, hey man, you weren't going to get them in the regular season, or in the football non-conference. I don't care. I think it's great. So. It's just because it's a Power 5 matchup, which is what we want.
Yep.
Let's not look for reasons to try to hamper that. Because, prime example, I think it bothers me a great deal that Oklahoma's schedule is so soft this year. So soft.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be. They were supposed to play Georgia. They were supposed to play the king of the castle in the non-conference. We'd be talking about that game in a couple of 3 weeks. But the SEC was like, no, save it. We're not doing that. And so there was this home and home that was taken off the books. And I don't necessarily know why. I know that they weren't conference mates yet, but they were going to be the following year. But I'm for more of this kind of stuff, not less.
Yeah, and I hope it would not be at the expense of some other Power 5 slot, although my inclination would be that it would. But if this could say, I don't know, give the boot to a Tarleton State game, then yeah, sign me up all day long. And look, time is ticking, boys, on what you're going to do with this Texas Tech Arizona 2034 game. So you better get to making plans because it'll be here before you know it. I bet that one might get wiped out. Texas Tech does not have any non-conference games scheduled like K-State with future conference members as it stands at this time. Chris mentioned, obviously, Oregon State coming up just around the corner. You've also got some Power 5 matchups with Mississippi State, NC State, Arkansas back around in 2030, 2031. So I don't know if it'll impact the Red Raiders, but I am for it if this is something that keeps a quality or Power 5 game on your schedule. Let us know how you feel in the YouTube comments. Agree or disagree?
I just wonder if people will still be, watching Locked On Texas Tech in those years. You think we'll be, still young enough and spry enough to keep kicking out show after show every day?
Well, it won't matter because it'll be AI generated. It won't be us. It'll be an AI representation of what we would say.
Man, I've seen some of that stuff out there
Yeah.
with them trying to do some sports writing stuff with high schools and stuff. It's bad, man. Ooh, it's bad.
Locked On's going to go on strike just like Hollywood, and no one's going to notice, just like Hollywood. Hey, right now, Chris, if you were here, I'd let you pinch me just to show the folks at home we are real. But we'll have to pinch ourselves. Let's do it during the break, and we're back after that with our first preseason notable of 3: freshmen, a sleeper, and a breakout star. We're starting with the impact freshman next on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech a part of your day, whenever, wherever, however you're making it happen. We love you for it. Special shout out to those everydayers and the first listeners, which some of you, I know, wait till you get off work at 5 o'clock to take it in. You listen to nothing all day, and we appreciate that dedication, though your employer may have an issue with it. Chris, let's wrap it up. Back with the Red Raiders here locally as we're edging closer to a game week, just a few days away. So wanted to take the final few days of this week to get into preseason notables as we see them. You broke this down for me in 3 different categories, Chris. We're going to talk impact freshman we like. We're going to talk about a sleeper we like that maybe is flying under the radar, but we have seen before in a Tech jersey. And we want to talk about a potential breakout star, someone that was in the realm of a full-time starter or rotational starter a season ago, but really could take that next step and maybe flirt with something, say, all conference. So let's begin today with the impact freshmen. And here they are, boys. For myself, I am going with Myles Dingle, and Chris is going with the leader of the legal firm, Chapman Lewis of Lewis, Sanford, and Jordan. Chris, I'm interested to see what freshmen might bubble up. And I guess in general, in some ways, I'm hoping that we're not necessarily talking about freshmen having to carry a load. I want to get your thoughts on Lewis here in just a moment. But let me give you somebody else's thoughts on Myles Dingle.
Has had a ton of reps with the number 2 group. So that's been really good. You're growing up a freshman that's extremely talented, really, really fast.
Dingle, to me, Chris, was, I'm rolling the dice, obviously, as both of us are on either of these guys, but I think he's a freak athlete, was a top 15 or so athlete, depending on the service in the state of South Carolina. He's got NFL bloodlines, and he's a dude that has been here early. And like you just heard there from the head coach, because of some injury impact to others, has gotten a ton of reps. So, whether he will or whether we even want him to, I don't know. But this is one of those special skill sets as far as their athleticism is concerned.
Yeah, the only guys I was gonna potentially suggest for something like this had to be here early. I think that there is one that is shown up in the summer that I think has really turn some heads, and that's Marcus Ramon Edwards, local product.
Yeah.
That I think has really done well, similar to Dingle and kind of the position that he can play and just kind of measurables and things like that. Just a freak athlete. I went with Chapman Lewis. I think that, Jordan Sanford, Brendan Jordan, it was kind of like, okay, pick one of the triplets. I went with Chapman just because he plays corner. And I think that, what I guess I'm suggesting is that I think AJ McCarty won't be eligible. That's going to be my assumption until I'm told differently. So I think there's some need there still at corner, even though you've got Braylon Lux, but you've had Malik Dunlap, missing some time. And I think, you do have Mo Horn, but you just need more people that can cover in this day and age than ever before. And I think Chapman Lewis, again, he needs to add some weight. But I go back to the spring when they were like, dude, he led us in tackles. He's a tackling machine. Like if you get near him, he's going to throw that 185 around as much as he can. And, he's just a good tackler. But the Burleson Centennial product, I just think he's come in and been really good. But so have Brendan Jordan and Jordan Sanford. I just kind of – because one of them plays the star, one of them plays a safety, one of them plays a corner. And so I just kind of went with the one that was playing corner. But I think they're all three have been really, really good. And I think it's been very impressive to the staff. But I went with Lewis. And we'll see if we're right, because I think all the names that we've mentioned here could, in fact – and what's telling is that we mentioned several names here on defense. You're not really going to mention anybody on offense because there's not – really any spot for any freshmen just yet to unless it's maybe an Anquan Willis at running back. There's really not a whole lot of need for the younger guys to kind of emerge because you're so, old and everybody's back on that side of the ball.
And Chris, I don't think it's that much of a different situation defensively. It's that some of these guys have been unable to be ignored during their time on campus, which features some extra time for these guys we're talking about, early enrollees. But I don't know. I kind of look across defensively as well, and I think if some of those who are expected to, say, be a frontline starter or maybe a second-string guy, do what they should do, I don't know how many freshman names we're going to be calling in general. And I guess at the end of the day, that's got to be chalked up to being a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think the difference in the way that I think your classes on offense are a little more staggered, whereas defensively you're really old and then it just skips to really young. There's not a lot of junior, sophomore, junior flavor within your defensive structure of your classes, and that's why I think some of these freshmen have been so key because they're going to be in. And I will say this too, offensively, you're going to rotate a ton of receivers. I don't know if that rotation is 6 or 10, but somewhere. And then you're going to rotate some running backs. You don't rotate a quarterback if you don't plan to, and you really don't want to rotate offensive line. However, defensively, there's not a position on that side of the ball that you don't rotate. So more guys typically play on defense. Hence the reason that some of these guys could get some run because. That's true. You're rotating everybody out there. There's nobody that you just say, hey, man, stay. I mean, Tyree Wilson came out plenty last year. That's just the way it goes because you want effort and you want fresh effort. So, anyway, I think that is kind of why. But, man, I'm excited about that next wave of defenders, man, because I think you struck gold with some of these guys.
Feels a hell of a lot different than, say, one of those years where our linebackers are going to be freshmen and one was a basketball player. Back to the D's Iguavan days. That was a little scary heading into game number 1 where you knew this is the option. This is not a sleeper. This is not like we hope he figures in. No, these are the guys. Things have changed considerably since that time. And shout out to Sam Iguavan for not being a basketball player anymore. He became a professional football player.
It still is.
It still is. That's right. All right, Chris, appreciate the time and insights as always. And, yeah, let us know in the YouTube comments who's standing out to you as far as a possible impact freshman. Tomorrow we'll get to the sleeper. Friday we'll wrap it up with a breakout star. So let us know throughout the week how you're seeing it, agreeing or disagreeing. Chris, we'll do it again tomorrow, man. Looking forward to it. We'll see you then.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it. Getting closer. We leave for Fort Collins, Colorado a week from tomorrow.
That's right.
Giddy up.
Also tomorrow, I know we're going to have things from a conversation with Brett Yormark in the LBK today. Red Raider kickoff luncheon happening. Yormark in the 806. And so I'm sure some things to discuss coming up on tomorrow's episode after that has come to its conclusion. Enjoy it if you're taking it in, and we'll digest some of it with you coming up tomorrow. We'll see you for the next round then on Locked On Texas Tech.